I reserve my right to do within my own body what feels right to me. There can be no laws about what goes on inside a person's body. And I'm engaged in several court cases right now testing the constitutionality of these laws which tell you what you can put in your body. The marijuana laws are clearly against the Constitution, against the ancient traditions of mankind. The laws against LSD will not stand up. What you can do, you can put labels on the package, and we're all in favor of the FDA and the federal government putting labels on the package. If I want to kill myself quickly with cyanide or slowly with cigarettes, fine. Let the government tell me that. Let the government put on the marijuana package the scientific evidence about marijuana. Let the government put on the booze bottle what booze does for you if they want to be concerned with public health. But they cannot pass laws and maintain laws which govern what people are going to do, particularly something pleasant and something revelatory and something educational like LSD. Why are 10 million Americans smoking marijuana today? I mean, these are not criminals, they're not dope fiends. Matter of fact, they come from your best colleges, and they're your most effective people. The latest statistic is that 70% of the freshman class at Harvard smoke marijuana. Now, that's my old alma mater, and I don't want to boast, but that's a sign of the times. You just can't stop intelligent, thoughtful people from doing something that feels good and right to them. I believe that human intelligence is evolving very quickly, particularly.
Well, I think there's another theory that really dislikes me intensely. He thinks that I've led the young people astray.
They asked Leary, who are you? I mean, some people say you're the devil. Some people say you're this prophet. Vibrant, hilarious, brilliant, out of high school, crazy, senator. College.
In carefully controlled experiments, interesting results have been reported on the therapeutic use of LSD. The group use of the hallucinogens at parties is becoming a familiar part of the scene.
Turn on, tune in, drop out.
As far as Leary was concerned, psychotherapy didn't work very well because the therapist was in a position of authority, and the patient was subject to the norms that the psychotherapist was projecting in order to conform.
He didn't like the Freudians, and he also didn't like the Skinnerian behaviorists, and he was looking for this middle ground.
My name is Timothy Leary, and I'm a philosopher and a scientist. But I should abbreviate or punctuate that by saying I'm a humanist, philosopher, scientist.
He was really more interested in humanistic psychology, taking a more holistic approach to mind, body, and spirit. Even before psychedelic drugs, he was interested in Carl Rogers. He studied a little bit with Erik Erikson, some of the leading humanistic psychologists of the time.
Humanizing the relationship, putting the patient at the center, and using the patient, not trying to change the patient to conform to standards, but letting the patient's personality be important in that process.
He had made quite a name for himself in the 50s, particularly with a book that he had written for schools. And so he already was well known, and his theories.
In 1959, when he was a professor at Harvard, one of his friends and fellow professors, Frank Barron, told him that he had taken some psilocybin mushrooms, and it had been very interesting, and that it might have some value for their work in working with troubled people and psychological theory and so forth. And Tim didn't like this idea at all because he was sort of an anti-authoritarian in the psychiatric field. And in psychiatry, people use drugs, and they use electroshock therapy, and they use other, external implementations to control people, to make them behave properly, rather than to as a therapeutic tool frequently. So Tim had this reaction of, it was like that Barron was suggesting another psychiatric drug, and this would be a bad thing. But then he just got the urge, you know, as Tim often did, the next summer, and he tried it, and he said that he got more out of that experience than in whatever it was, 20 years studying psychology. He learned more about the human mind than in 20 years studying psychology.
It changed him. He got a much bigger picture of the way things are. And when he came back to Harvard, he thought, I'd like to study this. I'd like to bring this into the academic curriculum. This is a pretty wild idea. But he was very persuasive, and he figured out that he will just do this the way it should be done with anything. He assembled a team which included Richard Alpert, later Baba Ramdas, Ralph Metzner, and others.
The group at Harvard, among others, were using it as serious research in their psychological studies. And I think at some point it just became a natural fit. Here was a respected scholar who was suggesting to people that this would really change your life.
You know, he gave very strong advice about how people should prepare for it, how people should think about it.
They studied this professionally in every way, with taking notes. There was a guide who observed. They had more than one observer.
What was I think important and fascinating about that work, though, is that Leary and his graduate students were taking psychedelics with the prisoners. They were tripping with the prisoners and having discussions with them and trying to relate to each other. That was what was radical. Not that they were taking drugs. All kinds of people were giving drugs to prisoners for drug research. I mean, horrible stuff was going on with prisoners. By doing that, he was breaking down the boundary between the researcher and the research subject, or between the therapist and the client, or the patient. And he was challenging those boundaries even before he took LSD, but that just really supercharged it.
This was part of the humanistic trend that came out of his work in the 60s, that the experimenters had to know what they were doing, what this experience was like, so that they could be a better therapist, a better guide, and understand better what the person was going through.
Well, Ronnie, it's been an hour and a half since you took the LSD, and I've noticed an increasing restlessness in you.
Extreme restlessness, yes. But my thoughts are in good control. I mean, I'm much more confident at this time.
You know, when most people think of the psychedelic 60s, they think of Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. They think of tie-dye, hippies, long hair, love beads, gurus, Eastern mysticism. But what you have to remember is that when Leary and Alpert started this in Harvard in 1960, that hadn't happened yet. And these guys looked not like the hippies in San Francisco from 1966, 67. They looked like the guys on Mad Men. They had those thin ties, their sports coats, the button-down look. And they weren't listening to the Jefferson Airplane. They were listening to cool jazz, Miles Davis. You know, they were smoking cigarettes just like Donald Draper. I mean, you look at the pictures, that's how they looked and that's how they thought. And people forget that. One of the things that Leary was trying to do is he was trying to give these drugs to not just to graduate students or prisoners or seminarians, but to artists and poets and writers and musicians to see how where they would take the experience.
They also invited people, distinguished minds like Aldous Huxley and Arthur Koestler, up to Harvard to be subjects in their experiments.
Probably the best known person who was part of this in the early years was Allen Ginsberg, who of course was already famous from the Beat generation of the 1950s. Allen Ginsberg and William Burroughs, the writer William Burroughs and poet Allen Ginsberg, they were both involved in the very beginning of this.
People at Harvard really felt like it should be given under controlled conditions. They weren't advocating it for young people. They were really looking at serious psychological studies. And then, you know, I think they looked around and it was all over. Everyone was taking it. It was what was going on.
I was curious about it. I had several friends who had taken it, and they told me that they had, you know, very good experiences with it, and I was just curious.
Well, I was curious what I read and what I've heard, and if it could help, I was just looking for something.
Sort of because I had heard it makes you not only closer with yourself, but with everybody, this sort of love, peace type thing. And I really wanted to find out if this was true.
Well, very quickly what happened is what began as a research project, it was originally called the Harvard Psilocybin Project, turned into something between a party, an orgy, the beginning of a social movement and a crusade.
At first, maybe they thought, you know, this is good, we can get some data from this, but by around 1962, they felt like these things were conflicting with each other.
We certainly think rebellion is a very healthy thing, and we like rebellion. And we think great changes in society come out of rebellion. And we think that we adults have kind of screwed things up. We haven't done a very good job in the adult world. With the bomb hanging over us in Vietnam, with our crazy ideas about censorship, our crazy sexual attitudes, our abortion laws, we haven't done a very good job. However, I do think that fooling with LSD is like Russian roulette. I don't think it's like swallowing goldfish. I don't think it's spinning a hula hoop or crowding a lot of people into a telephone booth. I think, unfortunately, this can be a permanent, long-lasting, damaging situation.
There was professional jealousy towards Leary because everybody was signing up for his classes. He was like the new guy, you know, like he didn't have tenure or anything. He wasn't an assistant professor even, he was an instructor. But like hundreds of people were signing up for his classes.
They were so on fire, so turned on about the potential of these drugs, that they kind of lost that academic, scholarly, scientific detachment. There was something of a cult of students forming around them. And there was kind of an in-group and an out-group in the department, depending on whether people were taking the psychedelic drugs or not. And there were rumors about inappropriate behavior with, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Rock and roll hadn't quite happened yet, but I guess it was happening, you know. But you know what I mean? I mean, there was just, it didn't have the normal kind of detached, you know, kind of scientific method. They weren't really using the scientific method. And they were challenging that idea, for one thing, right? So there started to be complaints about some of the students having some bad experiences, having some bad psychological experiences, and just the kind of the messianic kind of flavor that was developing around Leary and Alpert.
Drugs are going to flip a lot of people out and probably kill a lot of people. But if they haven't the sense to find out all there is that's been written about anything they're going to use, and if they haven't the discretion to decide whether or not, in the final analysis, they're capable of handling it, then that's their problem. They will flip out, and that's how it is.
Richard Alpert was the first professor, Harvard professor, to be fired in 100 years. I believe the early one was Ralph Waldo Emerson. Tim was not exactly fired, but on the pretext that he missed a class, he was, you know, let go. As he was sort of removed from the academic structure and sort of foisted upon the world, he had to you know, make his own way without an institutional net. William and Peggy Hitchcock were aware of LSD and thought it was a very important instrument for study, and they offered Leary, when he was like looking for a place to set up, you know, his private study, they offered him a 64-room mansion in Millbrook, and he just, you know, just to use. It was like a fantastic thing. He couldn't have been more excited. Well, from 1964 to 1968, those were his headquarters.
I think it started out as a place where they could seriously have studies. People could come there and do trips. They would write up trip reports. I think they were continuing their studies there, but certainly other people were coming for other purposes, and I'm sure that things got out of control as they do in those situations.
So they studied it a little more in the recreational context now than in the you know, the psychotherapeutic setting. You know, the recreational thing has become, you know, the thing that everybody officially is put down. But the idea was to tap people's creativity, to bring out the artist in people, and to free them from their 9-to-5 mentality. You know, they can go back to it if they wanted, but they should see that there's more than that. So this was like a new model, and it was best, you know, accomplished in a like a kind of a looser setting.
By around 1964, he was a popular lecturer on college campuses. Young people were becoming very interested in psychedelics. He was always funny and irreverent towards authority, so the young people really liked him, and so he would, you know, to bring home the bacon for the Millbrook commune, he would go out and do lecture tours.
The deputy sheriff of Poughkeepsie was a man named G. Gordon Liddy, whose career intertwined with Tim's very interestingly for many years. He surveilled the Millbrook estate. You know, they were in the woods. He and his sheriffs and deputies and cops were in the woods. They wanted to get the Millbrook people out of the community. They didn't like the idea that people were coming from, especially places like New York, Boston, coming there and tripping.
Damaged for life, their brains are wrecked, they go into institutions, they're thrown for the rest of their life.
I've read some silly things about kids falling out of trees and painting themselves green and yellow, and it's rather stupid to me.
It's no good.
They're taking it in sugar cubes, it's being dropped into their punch.
Well, truthfully, my friend, I know nothing about it. Only what I've read in the paper, what I see on television, and that's about all.
We've got to do something about this, don't you think so?
They raided Millbrook, arrested Tim and a whole bunch of people, and they charged them. Though all they found was, you know, a few joints, a few pills.
Turn on, tune in, drop out.
Turn on, tune in, drop out slogan for Timothy. Turn on meant to, well, to get high with drugs or with other consciousness-altering techniques.
Everyone turns on in different ways. There's meditation, which of course became much more mainstream. There's all kinds of ways to go into yourself and look at yourself, which is really a lot of what psychedelics do for you.
Tune in for him meant to tune in on what he called the web of life, that everything is this whole system, that it's all connected, that it's alive, pulsating, vibrating, copulating, full of life and energy. And then for him, drop out meant to detach yourself from the games that people play, detach yourself, see through the establishment, see through the institutions.
So the drop out part was heard from by the political people who don't care about politics, don't try to change the world. So that was what was controversial. It wasn't just controversy among the establishment. It was controversial among the left, the new left at the time.
It didn't necessarily mean drop out completely and, you know, don't keep your economic stuff together. But it was taken certainly by many within the youth culture to mean just stop all activity and go find yourself a seat next to the other people on Haight Street and ask for spare change. And he was very disappointed that it was misunderstood in that way.
It isn't that Tim was saying, you know, everybody should take it. He was really being quite responsible in his speeches, but because he was talking on college campuses and writing openly and putting a very positive spin on it, he sort of became the spokesman for the, you know, for trippers, for the positive uses of LSD and other psychedelic substances. And he took a lot of the heat. You might say he was on the front lines.
Within the counterculture, I think there's the perception that he just was, you know, a fame whore.
He liked publicity. There's no question about it. And he got better and better at handling the press. But the idea of the publicity was, well, partly it was his personality, you know, but partly he wanted to get the word out.
LSD is the most powerful substance that a human being has ever developed for influencing the mind. I've used the comparison of nuclear energy or a fissionable material.
I think that in the right hands and with scientific and disciplined and hopeful people, it will bring about change.
We now demand we no longer have a say in decisions that affect our lives. We call on all students, faculty, staff, and workers of the university to support our strike.
American youth were demanding radical messages. And so a lot of people were calling for revolution in the streets. And the Vietnam War was considered a genocidal war. And there was a war, COINTELPRO, local war being waged against the Black Panthers and against the New Left and to some degree against the hippies. So dropout at that time was a severe response to a severe situation. Kids were dropping out already. He was responding to something that was happening. He was following the young people in a lot of ways.
Well, I want to make it clear that I didn't invent LSD. God made LSD, the evolutionary process. LSD has been used in its plant form for thousands of years. Nor have I been a pusher or a advocate of LSD. I have been in the position of a prophet who's been pointing out to his fellow man that this was going to happen. 7, 6, 5 years ago, several of us from Harvard went down to Washington. We told the FDA, hey, listen, there's going to be an LSD boom. It can't be stopped. It's going to be used. It's going to take over. You better be ready for it. Then I'm in the unfortunate position of Cassandra, who, when the hurricane occurs, is blamed for it. Far from telling people they should take LSD, my message to young people is, since you're going to take it anyway, be careful when you take it. Take it for the right reasons. Take it in a sense of seriousness, and take it well prepared. And don't take it unless you know what you're getting into.
He was challenging theology, you know, religion. He was challenging education. He was challenging art. He was challenging Madison Avenue, you know, the consumer society. He was challenging television and what television was doing to people.
He was interested in issues like cognitive freedom. We should have the right to do whatever we want to with our own brains and our own minds, and the government should not control that. And that is one of the reasons that Richard Nixon called Timothy Leary the most dangerous man in America. I mean, in a way, he was. I mean, and very quickly he became the sort of the poster child, the high priest, as he called himself, of the psychedelic 60s. He became the symbol for all the craziness that was going on. Some of it inspired by him, some of which we had nothing to do with.
During the period 64 to 70, he was under constant pressure and threat. He was arrested, his phone was tapped, all the usual things. His attitude towards this was like, they're not going to stop me. This is too important. People should know what the psychedelic experience is.
Yes, I'm in prison, and that may seem odd, a philosopher in prison, but I have to say this about my profession. The best philosophers often end up in prison. If you're a good baseball player, you end up in the major leagues. If you're a really successful politician, you end up in Washington, I'm sorry to say. If you're really a good philosopher, you're coming out with new ideas about the 7 great destiny questions that are going to rattle the walls of the social institution. Most of the men that I model myself after have been lucky if they got away with just being in prison for their ideas.
There were all kinds of reasons to not like Timothy Leary, but you know, looking back on it, you know, the 60s just would not have been the same without him. A lot of this would have still happened, but he was just such a showman, so charismatic, so brilliant, and so out there that he really kind of he reflected the rebellious spirit of the 1960s.
His legacy is still It's just beginning to really take shape.
There have been experiments at Harvard again, and Johns Hopkins, and a whole bunch of other different institutions, both in the United States and in a number of other places all over the world.
I was recently at a psychedelic conference in Northern California, and one thing that I noticed, that all of the researchers who were there, the people who are now doing social research with psychedelics, all of them are still using the concept of set and setting.
The importance of set and setting, which basically just means the state of mind that you're in when you take these drugs, what your expectations are, what the environment is. And that really helped people find a way to take these drugs in an intelligent manner. I think that was one of the more important contributions they made to psychedelic research.
Today, the most important tool for self-growth and independence of thought is the personal computer. They expand consciousness, and they produce higher levels of imagination. They are powerful, they are safe, and so far, they're still legal.
He famously said, the personal computer, the PC, was the LSD of the 90s. And Tim's legacy was actually first, came to light with the computer generation.
Most of all, look at the World Wide Web. You had these geeks in the Silicon Valley dropping acid, and that language, whatever that language was talking to them in that state. You know, mathematics became some language that you would use to program. And I think it's fairly well known, if it weren't for psychedelics, that we talk about something that's changed the world.
You know, I think in a lot of ways the psychedelic revolution influenced the way we think of the whole mind-body-spirit movement, how we look at health, holistic health. I think it certainly changed the way we look at religion and spirituality. People are more interested in personal religious experience rather than doctrine and dogma and denominationalism. You know, even in a way, I think helped inspire the environmental movement. When people have these experiences in nature where they feel one with nature on this kind of cosmic, just deep, soul-shattering level, that changes the way you look at the planet. And so I think there were a lot of positive things that came out of the psychedelic 60s. There were also a lot of casualties. And we all, people of my generation, the baby boom generation, we all know people who blasted off with Timothy Leary and never came back.
I think he made great contributions. Do I think he made some mistakes? I think probably so. But who doesn't?
My appeal to you, my logical invitation to you is going to be as follows. Turn on, tune in, and take over.